But today's world, it's changing into the future. They're not making millions no more. They're making billions. And they're spending it fast as they make it. I want a piece of that for my men, because when they made their most money was during COVID. When my men had to go to work on those piers every single day, when everybody stayed home and went to work. Not my men. They died out there with the virus. We all got sick with the virus. We kept them going. From Canada to Maine to Texas, Great Lakes, Puerto Rico, now the Bahamas, everybody went to work during COVID. Nobody stayed home. Well, I want to be compensated for that. I'm not asking for the world. They know what I want. They know what I want. And if they don't, well, then I have to go into the street and we have to fight for what we rightfully deserve. These people today don't know what a strike is.
Right.
When my men hit the streets, from Maine to Texas, every single port will lock down. You know what's gonna happen? I'll tell you. First week, be all over the news every night, boom, boom. Second week, guys who sell cars can't sell cars because the cars ain't coming in off the ships. They get laid off. Third week, malls start closing down. They can't get the goods from China. They can't sell clothes. They can't do this. Everything in the United States comes on a ship. They go out of business. Construction workers get laid off because the materials aren't coming in. The steel's not coming in. The lumber's not coming in. They lose their job. Everybody's hating the longshoremen now because now they realize how important our jobs are. Now I have the president screaming at me, I'm putting a Taft-Hartley on you. Go ahead. Taft-Hartley means I have to go back to work for 90 days. That's a cooling off period. Do you think when I go back for 90 days, those men are going to go to work on that pier? It's going to cost the company's money to pay their salaries. Well, they went from 30 moves an hour maybe to 8. They're going to be like this. Who's going to win here in the long run? You're better off sitting down and let's get a contract and let's move on with this world. And in today's world, I'll cripple you. I will cripple you, and you have no idea what that means. Nobody does.
Hey guys, welcome back in. That was, I believe his name is Harold Daggett, and he is the president of the ILA, which is the International Longshoremen's Association, which is a union for port workers, or longshoremen, as they are called. And right now, port workers, or workers from that union, are on strike up and down the East Coast and on the Gulf Coast. The strike has been looming for some time. If the strike is prolonged, it could mean that you won't be able to get your goods you're accustomed to buying at Costco or Walmart or wherever you shop. And it could have serious implications on the economy. And think about imports halting altogether on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast for 6 to 8 weeks. Not only would you not be able to get what you want at the store, but it would have, serious impacts on the economy. So we'll see what happens. But unions do strike all the time. So, they do happen, union strikes. And at some point, demands are met, or both sides split the difference in negotiations and, folks get back to work. But that hasn't happened yet. The strike just started. And as of Tuesday this week, the latest offer from the U.S. Maritime Alliance represented a nearly 50% pay increase for longshoremen over 6 years. But that deal was shot down. And if you are working a job like any person in the world and you get an offer for 50% pay raise, anybody would take that, right? I certainly would. But these guys didn't. Even though it's 50% sounds like a massive win. So why not take the deal and end the strike? Well, there's another variable to this negotiation, and that variable is automation. The union is looking for, and it's unclear exactly what kind, but they're looking for considerations as it relates to automation and their longevity. I think they see the writing on the wall with technology, and they know the right technology can displace them if it's allowed to be implemented. So this is from a New York Times article. The, quote, the ILA, which has more than 47,000 members, said it had discovered that the gate at a particular port was using technology to check and let in trucks without union workers, which it said violated its labor contract. We will never allow automation to come into our union and try to put us out of work as long as I'm alive, said Harold Daggett, the union president and chief negotiator. Longshoremen have grim memories of how past innovation reduced employment at the docks. Shipping containers introduced in the 60s allowed ports to move goods with fewer workers. You don't have to pay pensions to robots, said Brian Jones, a foreman at the port in Philadelphia, who said he would vote for a strike if it came to it, end quote. It will be, interesting to see how far the union takes this. And at one of the protests that started popping off, the workers or the union members are holding signs that say, workers over machines, or machines don't feed families, or put workers first, that sort of thing. So even though it's not good for the economy to have a prolonged shutdown, if it were my job or your job facing, implementation of a technology that could put us out of work, we may be or feel compelled to risk the economy for some level of longevity. So if the strike is prolonged, keep that in mind. It's going to be easy to get mad at these longshoremen. And this could have the reverse effect, that the longshoremen want. They want some protections in that contract from automation. But the reverse could be true, in that, this only expedites automation into ports in the future. There's a software company out there trying to solve that problem right now to do away with humans altogether. And there are videos floating around of more advanced ports in Southeast Asia, I think Singapore, in which they're 99% automated. And the people running the port are sitting behind computer terminals doing it remotely. And so that's what these longshoremen don't want, because they do make good money. Longshoremen make very good wages. But, if this technology is implemented, they won't be making any wages. So that's what they're fighting for. And, maybe, I guess the argument could be made that, this has all happened before. Innovation has happened before. But like we've talked about on this podcast, is that, we're in a different time than any other time in history. And the technology that's being made today is not necessarily job creating, but job destroying. So, what are these longshoremen going to do? They certainly can't go learn to code, because coding's on its way out. And if you're 62 and you've been a longshoreman for 40 years, what are you going to do to make it to Social Security? You'll take whatever you can get, I guess. I'm not a union guy. I don't, I've historically been against unions, coming from a non-union state. And unions always have this, so they're sort of overrepresented when it comes to politics, because they reside in states that are key states. The presidential election really comes down to 6 or 8 states. And guess what? Those 6 or 8 states, for the most part, have heavy union presence. So they punch above their weight politically. But we all might want to unionize before it's over with, if what we think is coming is coming. So, but this is not the first story like this, right? I think we highlighted a story in early 2023 about a truckers union in California, which was lobbying to halt legislation aimed at self-driving vehicles, or self-driving trucks in that case. And we also saw more recently that the Writers Guild, or the Screen Actors Guild, I can't recall which one, was looking for considerations as it related to AI encroaching on their work. So the longshoremen are not the first to plant their stake in the ground against automation, and they certainly won't be the last. All right, so I've got a lot to get to today, and I've got a cold, so I apologize for that. If things sound off, that's why. So our last episode, we talked about the imminent release of Strawberry from OpenAI. It turns out that the release happened the very day that episode of this podcast was released. And reviews are in, and Strawberry delivers. Strawberry was the code name for the project of this new model. The model, which was released, is called O1. O, the letter, and the number 1, O1. It's my understanding that this is not part of the GPT-4 models, nor is it GPT-5, which GPT-5 represents the next leap. That is not this. O1 is in its own family of models. And I realize this is nerd talk, so forgive me for a second. The following is a description from the Every blog about O1 and its capabilities. So from the Every blog, quote, "It's significantly better at reasoning tasks, scoring in the 89th percentile in competitive programming, and exceeding PhD level smarts on physics, biology, and chemistry questions. It's been taught to use chain of thought reasoning to answer each question it's given rather than just blurting out a response. Chain of thought used to be just a prompting technique that would involve or improve outputs in the original GPT models. O1 is different because it's been trained via reinforcement learning to always use chain of thought in its responses without any extra prompting required. Now when you ask ChatGPT with O1 enabled, up pops an expandable thinking indicator that lets you see its thought process," end quote. And that's absolutely true. If you're a subscriber to ChatGPT, you can watch ChatGPT try and work through the problem in real time. So if you ask it a question, a bubble will pop up, it'll say analyzing, another bubble will pop up saying analyzing constraints, and so on and so forth until you get an answer. And lastly, where GPT-1, 2, 3, and 4 all had a handle and still do have a handle on natural language, O1's problem-solving capabilities allow it to handle those issues not language-centric. So think engineering, physics, etc. Insiders and those in tech that utilize O1 are hugely impressed by it. So now when we get GPT-5, perhaps it will be some combination of GPT-4's language mastery with O1's reasoning capability with obvious, leaps in improvement. And up for our first real headline this week from Futurism.com, quote, "OpenAI says it fixed issue where ChatGPT appeared to be messaging users unprompted," end quote. So right after Strawberry was released, I started seeing stories about this very thing. This is atypical for OpenAI, as OpenAI has stated previously that they didn't plan to use their product as an AI companion or AI assistant necessarily. In any case, I imagine it was very creepy to hear your phone prompt a conversation with you. In one of the cases I read, ChatGPT asked the user how their exam went, as they had previously conversed about an exam coming up on the next day. In any case, initiation of conversation by our AIs is probably going to be the rule and not the exception in the near future. As AI assistants and AI companions become normalized, we should probably expect that to be the case. All right, our next headline is from the New York Times, quote, 3 Mile Island plans to reopen as demand for nuclear power grows, end quote. So 3 Mile Island probably rings a bell because it's the site of the U.S.'s largest nuclear accident. One of its reactors had a partial meltdown in 1979. Really, since that time, nuclear energy has been on the back foot, or its back foot. The potential risk for nuclear accidents far outweighed the benefits for its energy production. Couple 3 Mile Island with the disaster at Fukushima in Japan, and any strong arguments for nuclear power quickly, lose their strength. For full disclosure, I should say that I worked in the nuclear industry for a time, so I may not be completely objective here. Having said that, since Fukushima, safety redundancies have been implemented at all U.S. sites and sites around the world, and those sites are far safer than they were previously. Only one new nuclear facility has been brought online since the 80s, and that was a plant in Georgia a few years ago. The costs were exorbitant, but that plant will be, reliably pumping out energy for the next 40 years, if not 60 years, with little to no CO2 emissions. So, if you're serious about taking action against climate change, nuclear probably has to be part of that equation. And even though cost and risk have made nuclear prohibitive in the U.S. over the past several decades, other countries, such as China, have been moving forward with nuclear facilities. But what's driving, this renewed interest in nuclear power and reopening 3 Mile Island? Well, the answer is data centers. Data centers are quickly becoming the top energy consumer in the U.S., and current U.S. infrastructure will not be able to support the increase in AI investment and subsequent data centers over the next few decades. Top AI companies see this, and they are making their moves to secure energy to run their AIs, essentially. And this specific effort to open 3 Mile Island was largely due to a request from Microsoft to support their data centers. It's unclear if all of the energy produced at 3 Mile Island will be allocated specifically for Microsoft, but we do know that Microsoft is the biggest driver of this reopening. But, this is big. It's a major milestone in the AI journey. If data is king for AI development, and it is, massive sources of energy will be needed to feed the machine. And it'll be interesting to see if this trend, continues with other shuttered nuclear facilities. And next up from CNBC, quote, Microsoft BlackRock formed group to raise $100 billion to invest in data centers and power, end quote. So from that article, quote, Microsoft and BlackRock are part of a group of companies collaborating to pull together up to $100 billion to develop data centers for AI and energy infrastructure to power them. The companies are part of the global AI infrastructure investment group. The group aims to assemble $30 billion in initial capital with a future goal of $100 billion, end quote. That's a lot of capital, and you could build several nuclear reactors for that kind of money. I don't know how concerned we should be that Microsoft is partnering with BlackRock. At least one of the other companies is headquartered in the UAE, and if this is a global race to dominate the world, those relationships should probably be questioned. And just as an aside to this article, there was also a group of AI labs who met at the White House a few weeks ago to discuss energy infrastructure specifically for AI. All the big players, NVIDIA, Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, were there with the goal of public and private sectors working together to ensure infrastructure is where it needs to be over the next few decades to meet that demand for energy consumption. So next up is from The Atlantic, quote, Microsoft's hypocrisy on AI, end quote. From that article, quote, Microsoft executives have been thinking lately about the end of the world. In a white paper published last year, the company's vice chair and president and its chief sustainability officer described a planetary crisis that AI could help solve. Imagine an AI-assisted tool that helps reduce food waste, to name one example from the document, or some future technology that could expedite decarbonization by using AI to invent new designs for green tech. But as Microsoft attempts to buoy its reputation as an AI leader in climate innovation, the company is also selling its AI to fossil fuel companies. Hundreds of pages of internal documents obtained by the writer of this article, plus interviews conducted over the past year with 15 current and former employees show that the tech giant has sought to market the technology to companies like Exxon and Chevron as a powerful tool for finding and developing new oil and gas reserves and maximizing their production, all while publicly committing to drastically reducing emissions. So I'm not, shocked by this. Microsoft is going to Microsoft. They are a giant and want to remain a giant. And if that means they that they do business with less climate conscious industries, then that's what they'll do. I just wanted to point out that Microsoft's pursuit of revenue is not without its detractors. Our next article is from The Verge. The headline is about actors coming out in force for California's AI safety bill. And a bunch of heavy hitters in Hollywood did come out for what would have been the first AI bill, SB 1047 of its kind, but it failed. Governor Gavin Newsom, who in many ways looks like a Bond villain, vetoed the bill, citing the fact that it didn't include considerations for smaller AI labs. Though to be clear, this bill wasn't, the bill was targeting safe AI generally and didn't include protections for actors. That's not what it was about. I may have not been clear on that. The focus generally was and is AI safety. As you know, and as we just discussed it extensively here, AI labs all seem to be throwing caution to the wind in pursuit of AGI. And I'm not one to typically enjoy the moral preening of Hollywood types, but good for them on this. I think it's needed. But again, the bill was vetoed, so we'll see what the next step is for legislation in California on AI. I want to start winding down this episode by talking about OpenAI almost exclusively. And if you wonder why I put so much focus on OpenAI, then consider this. There are certainly other AI labs or companies that warrant coverage, but OpenAI is largely seen as the far and away front runner in the pursuit of AGI. There are companies probably with comparable funding or data, think, Anthropic or Meta. But OpenAI seems to be who all the other companies look to as the leader. Certainly a smaller lab could make it to AGI first, and certainly other AI labs are releasing impressive AI products. But OpenAI, for the better part of 2 years now, has been the trendsetter. And I would say that, Sam Altman, its CEO, is really the poster child for AI at this point and looks to be for the foreseeable future. So if these companies are looking to create a godlike intelligence or power, it certainly makes sense for us to keep our eyes on the company at the front of the line. So, having said that, our next article is from Reuters, quote, OpenAI to remove nonprofit control and give Sam Altman equity, end quote. So, to anyone paying attention to the race for AI supremacy, this shouldn't come as a shock. OpenAI is working to restructure the company into a for-profit corporation. The nonprofit board would no longer have control over OpenAI. And I'm going to read part of this article, which gives you some background on how we got to where we are today. So, quote, the OpenAI nonprofit will continue to exist and own a minority stake in the for-profit company. The move could also have implications on how the company manages AI risk in a new governance structure. Chief Executive Sam Altman will also receive equity for the first time, which could be worth $150 billion after the restructuring. The company's unusual structure, which gives full control of the for-profit to the nonprofit, was originally set to ensure the mission of creating safe AGI that is broadly beneficial, referring to artificial general intelligence. The structure came into focus last November during one of the biggest boardroom dramas in Silicon Valley, where members of the nonprofit board ousted Sam Altman over a breakdown in communication and loss of trust. He was reinstated 5 days later with overwhelming support from employees and investors. Since then, OpenAI's board has been refreshed with more tech executives. Any corporate changes need approval from its 9-person nonprofit board. The removal of nonprofit control could make OpenAI operate more like a typical startup, a move generally welcomed by its investors who have poured billions into the company. However, it could also raise concerns from the AI safety community about whether the lab still has enough governance to hold itself accountable in pursuit of AGI, as it has dissolved the super alignment team that focused on long-term risk of AI earlier this year. It's unclear how much equity Altman will receive. He's already a billionaire from multiple startup investments, has previously stated that he chose not to take an equity stake in the company because the board needed a majority of disinterested directors with no stake in the company. He also said he has enough money and is doing it because he loves the work. The new structure of OpenAI would resemble that of its major rivals, Anthropic and xAI, which are registered as benefit corporations, a form of for-profits that aim to promote social responsibility and sustainability in addition to making profits, end quote. So what's important there is that the mechanisms that were in place to keep OpenAI focused on a benevolent AGI for humanity have been dissolved or are working on being resolved, which brings us to our next article from the Wall Street Journal. Quote, turning OpenAI into a real business is tearing it apart. So as the business looks to go full for-profit, OpenAI is hemorrhaging its leadership. If you'll remember, OpenAI lost the bulk of its safety alignment team several months ago. And the latest departure was the chief technology officer, Mira Murati. Naturally, Sam Altman states that this is normal in the course of business, but is it? Why so much turnover among the leadership? If you're working on a world-changing technology that's as exciting as AI is, wouldn't this be the place you would want to be? I don't know. Perception is reality, and it looks like there may be some friction at OpenAI, especially since the board tried to oust Sam Altman at the end of last year. In public, he speaks with great humility about the situation and working through those relationships, but it's difficult to imagine that humility being displayed behind the scenes. I guess it could be, and I hope I'm wrong. But OpenAI has also lost its chief research officer and VP of research within the last few weeks. And if OpenAI requires NDAs for folks to retain their equity stakes in the company, we may never know what is happening behind the scenes, which is concerning given that we know OpenAI shipped o1 before it was fully ready to go. So, make of that what you will. You're hemorrhaging leadership. You lost your safety alignment team within the past 6 months. The board tried to oust you last year for concerns over safety and communication. This company could be dictating the future of humanity. So that's why I bring it up, and it is a cause for concern. So, think about that when you don't have anything to worry about. Also, Sam Altman did write, right after the release of Strawberry, Sam Altman did write a blog entitled The Intelligence Age, which is pretty on brand. I'm not going to read it to you. I'll link to it in the show notes. But it's very on brand for Sam Altman. He talks, about a future in which we're, capable of doing things we've never imagined, just like our ancestors from 300 years ago couldn't imagine the lives that we live now. It'll be like that, but exponentially more. And it's very abstract. And, he talks about new jobs nobody's ever thought of. And he always talks in these abstract ways, but never really addresses the elephant in the room, which is, the problem facing the longshoremen right now, in which they're being made obsolete potentially, or facing that threat. And how to deal with that threat, and what happens when that threat comes and shows up. How do we deal with that? How do we manage that change and that break in the continuity humans have enjoyed with labor, for the past decades, hundreds of years, whatever it may be. So anyway, I'll link to that in the show notes, and I would recommend reading it, but it's really not that far away from how I described it. It's very abstract. So that is it for this episode. Remember to rate, review, and like the show on whatever platform you are utilizing to listen. Thank you for listening. We'll talk next time.